My hands trembled as I adjusted the microphone. The studio lights felt like an interrogation. But after 15 years of silence, the world deserved to know the truth about Russia's psychological warfare program, and what it cost those of us trapped inside it. Before I continue this story, if you find value in hearing hidden truths exposed, please consider subscribing to this channel and giving this video a thumbs up. Your support helps these stories reach those who need to hear them most. The cold Moscow morning I was recruited remains etched in my memory like a scar. I wasn't chosen for my patriotism or intelligence, though I had both. I was chosen because of my father. Colonel Nikolai Sokolov was a legend in Russian intelligence. His specialty? Recruiting and training intimate intelligence assets, what the West calls honeypots. Women and men trained to seduce targets for information. My father was a handler, manipulating assets like chess pieces on a global board. He never imagined his only daughter would become one of them. I was 19, studying linguistics at Moscow State University, when the men came. 2 suits, expressionless, with official papers listing my father's crimes against the state. Fabricated, of course. The message was clear: join us, or your father faces the consequences. Anya Sokolova, the taller man, said, "Your country needs you." 3 days later, I disappeared from university. My friends were told I'd received a prestigious scholarship abroad. In reality, I entered a shadowy facility outside Kazan that officially didn't exist. The training center resembled a luxury resort, manicured grounds, swimming pools, tennis courts. But the perimeter fences were topped with razor wire, and nobody could leave without authorization. 23 of us arrived that winter. We came from different backgrounds, dancers, university students, even a former Olympic gymnast, but we shared one quality: we were all extraordinarily ordinary. Forgettable faces that could transform, chameleon-like, into whatever our targets desired. "In this building, you will die," announced Director Volkov on our first day. "The person you were ceases to exist. You will be reborn as whatever we need you to be." The first 6 months broke us down completely. Psychological conditioning designed to erase personal boundaries. Classes in micro-expressions and body language. We learned to detect lies while telling them flawlessly. Our personal histories were erased and replaced with elaborate cover stories we rehearsed until they felt more real than our actual pasts. Katya, my roommate, cracked after 4 months. I found her in our bathroom, wrists slashed with a broken mirror shard. She survived, but I never saw her again. Weakness is elimination, Volkov reminded us at morning assembly the next day. Feelings are weaknesses. Attachments are weaknesses. The physical training was exhausting but straightforward. The psychological training was what haunted me. We studied human desire like scientists, identifying insecurities, manufacturing emotional connections, creating illusions of intimacy. We practiced on each other first, then on unwitting civilians during monitored field exercises. I excelled at reading people, a skill I'd developed watching my father's calculated interactions at diplomatic functions throughout my childhood. The irony wasn't lost on me. His career had made me the perfect candidate for the very program he'd helped create. By year 2, they began testing us on real targets: minor embassy officials, visiting businesspeople, journalists. We weren't extracting state secrets yet, just practicing building rapport and trust. My first assignment was an economic attaché from Portugal. I was tasked with discovering his gambling debts, information he'd hidden from his government. It took 3 weeks of carefully orchestrated, chance encounters. I still remember his face when he confessed his financial troubles over dinner, relief washing over him at having finally shared his burden with someone who seemed to understand without judgment. The guilt I felt was overwhelming. I'd manufactured every moment of connection between us. "Perfect work," my handler said afterward. He never suspected a thing. But I knew something had died inside me that night, the last remnant of whoever Anya Sokolova had been before. For 7 years, I lived as a ghost. I had 12 different names, spoke 6 languages flawlessly, and maintained apartments in 4 countries. I cultivated relationships with targets ranging from defense contractors to political aides, extracting information that helped Russia maintain its edge in the endless intelligence war. None of my targets ever knew my real purpose. The program's golden rule was simple: never develop genuine feelings. Emotional attachment compromised operational security. But humans aren't machines, no matter how thoroughly they're trained. Eventually, all of us faced the same impossible challenge: maintaining psychological distance while creating the perfect illusion of intimacy. For me, that breaking point came in Vienna, 2018. My target was Robert Ellsworth, an American diplomatic security specialist with access to protection protocols for visiting dignitaries. Our intelligence suggested he was vulnerable, recently divorced, isolated in a foreign posting, dedicated to his work to the exclusion of everything else. My cover was as a cultural attaché at the Russian embassy, allowing natural contact at diplomatic functions. The operation proceeded textbook perfect for 3 months. Coffee meetings discussing our shared interest in classical music. Carefully timed encounters while jogging in the Prater. The gradual building of trust, culminating in dinner at his apartment where he first mentioned his work frustrations. But Robert wasn't like my other targets. He was genuinely kind, thoughtful. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. Even knowing that my responses were carefully constructed to appeal to him, I found myself wishing I could answer honestly. For the first time, I wanted the connection to be real. One night after the opera, walking along the Danube, he stopped suddenly. "You know what I can't figure out about you, Anna," he said, using my cover name. "You're brilliant, beautiful, seemingly perfect. Yet sometimes I catch this look in your eyes, like you're drowning and nobody notices." Something broke inside me. 7 years of training, and he'd seen through the performance to the trapped person beneath. That night, I reported feeling ill and returned to my apartment instead of continuing the evening as planned. My handler was furious. "You're compromised," Leonid said flatly during our emergency meeting. "We're pulling you out. Report to Moscow for reassignment and psychological evaluation." I knew what that meant. Reassignment was the euphemism for the program's failures. Some were sent to remote diplomatic postings as actual attaches. Others disappeared entirely. Once you knew too much and proved unreliable, you became a liability. That night, I made the decision that would change everything. I wouldn't return to Moscow. I couldn't continue living as a weapon instead of a person. But defection carried enormous risks, not just for me, but for my father, still in Russia. I contacted Robert, telling him I needed urgent help. We met in a public park the next morning. "I'm not who you think I am," I said simply. What followed was the hardest conversation of my life. I confessed everything: my real identity, my mission, the program. To his credit, he listened without interruption, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to something unreadable. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked. "Because I can't do it anymore. And because you deserve the truth." He was silent for a long time. Then, "We need to get you somewhere safe." Within 24 hours, I was in a secure facility outside Vienna being debriefed by American intelligence officers. My defection set off an international diplomatic incident. Russia denied everything, claiming I was mentally unstable. 3 Russian diplomats were expelled from Austria. I later learned my father had been forcibly retired but otherwise left alone, too high profile to simply disappear. The American intelligence community was initially suspicious, concerned I might be a plant. It took months of debriefings and verification before they accepted my defection as genuine. In exchange for information about the program, I received a new identity and relocation to a country I still cannot name for security reasons. Robert and I maintained contact through secure channels during this period. Our relationship, built on such a foundation of deception, transformed into something unexpected, genuine friendship based on painful honesty. He was the one who first suggested I should tell my story publicly, once enough time had passed to make it safer. "The world needs to understand how these operations work," he said. "Not the Hollywood version, but the real psychological cost." For years, I remained silent, rebuilding some semblance of a normal life. Learning to form authentic connections. Discovering who I actually was beneath the layers of training and cover identities. The nightmares gradually became less frequent, though they never completely disappeared. Then last year, I learned about Anya Sokolovan's death. She'd been in my training cohort, brilliant, determined, seemingly indestructible. According to official reports, she died of heart failure at 36. But through my contacts, I discovered she'd actually taken her own life after a decade in the field. Her death became my catalyst. The program that consumed our lives continues recruiting new assets, destroying more lives in the name of national security. The public deserves to know the human cost of the intelligence shadows. Which brings me to this studio. To this moment. To breaking my silence. The Honeypot program isn't about sex, that's the simplistic Western view. It's about something far more intimate, weaponizing human connection. Creating perfect emotional forgeries. We weren't trained merely to seduce bodies, but to capture minds and hearts. To make targets believe they'd found genuine understanding in a world where such connections are increasingly rare. The real damage isn't to national security but to human trust. Each operation leaves behind people who may never trust their own judgment again. Who question every meaningful relationship that follows. I know because I've spoken with some of them, carefully, anonymously, in the years since my defection. As for me, recovery has been a slow, painful process. Learning to form genuine connections after years of manufacturing synthetic ones doesn't happen overnight. Every authentic emotion feels suspicious at first, like another performance. But gradually, moment by moment, real life begins to feel more substantial than the operational shadows. I still catch myself analyzing micro-expressions in casual conversations. I still automatically catalog exits when entering new spaces. Some habits remain hardwired. But now I use these skills consciously, aware of them rather than being defined by them. My father died last year in Moscow. We never spoke again after my defection. I couldn't attend his funeral. But among his personal effects, delivered to me through intermediaries, was a small wooden chess piece, a knight. It was from the set he'd used to teach me chess as a child. With it was a handwritten note with a single line, "You made the right move." I tell this story not to sensationalize espionage or to further any country's agenda, but because the truth about psychological manipulation deserves to be known. Because somewhere right now, another young person is being recruited, not understanding the personal cost of becoming someone else's weapon. If there's one message I want to leave you with, it's this: authentic human connection, with all its messiness and unpredictability, is worth protecting. It's the one thing no intelligence service, no matter how sophisticated, can truly replicate. The world's intelligence agencies understand this vulnerability and exploit it daily. Guard your trust carefully, but don't let fear prevent you from forming real connections. That's exactly what operations like the one I participated in want, a world where genuine trust becomes impossible. I looked directly into the camera, my voice steadier now. My name was Anya Sokolova. For 7 years, I was trained to make you believe whatever I wanted you to believe. Today, I'm asking you to believe only what resonates as truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you or made you think differently about trust and connection in our modern world, please support this channel by liking and subscribing. There are more hidden truths that need to be brought into the light. The response to my video was overwhelming. Millions of views within days. Diplomatic denials. Former intelligence officers from various nations confirming elements of my account while disputing others. Journalists attempting to verify my identity. Through it all, I maintained my anonymity, appearing only in shadow or with my voice and appearance digitally altered. My security depends on it. But the conversation my testimony sparked continues expanding. 3 months after the video, I received a message through secure channels from a woman claiming to be a former Chinese intelligence operative trained in similar techniques. 2 weeks later, an Israeli man reached out with his own story. Gradually, a network formed, survivors of various psychological intelligence programs sharing experiences and recovery strategies. We call ourselves the Handler's Children now, a grim joke acknowledging that we were all created by systems that viewed us as assets rather than humans. Together, we're documenting the global scope of these programs and their evolution in the digital age. What began as my personal testimony has become something larger, a collective effort to bring accountability to the shadows. Robert remains my closest friend and ally in this work. His background in diplomatic security proved invaluable in establishing secure communication protocols for our growing network. Our relationship has evolved into something neither of us could have predicted that day in Vienna, partners in exposing the very systems that brought us together. You know the program directors are watching everything we do, he reminded me recently during one of our encrypted calls. Let them watch, I replied. Their power depends on silence and isolation. Every story we share weakens their foundation. Last week, a journalism student approached me after a closed-door university lecture I gave under an assumed name. She couldn't have been more than 20, the age I was when recruited. How do you know who to trust now? She asked. After everything you experienced? I considered her question carefully. Trust isn't binary, all or nothing. It's a practice, a continual choice. I watch for consistency between words and actions over time. I value transparency about motivations. But mostly, I've learned that calculated risk is part of genuine connection. Perfect safety and real intimacy can't coexist. She nodded thoughtfully. Is it worth it? The risk? Always, I said without hesitation. Without trust, we're just isolated individuals moving through space. With it, we become part of something larger than ourselves. As she turned to leave, I noticed her hand briefly touch a distinctive pendant, one I recognized as being associated with a particular Foreign Intelligence Services youth recruitment program. Perhaps she was already being evaluated as a potential asset. Perhaps it was coincidence. I let her go without comment. Seeds of doubt are part of the legacy of my former life. But so is the capacity to choose trust despite uncertainty. That's the complex freedom I fought to claim. My work continues. Each testimony we document, each operational method we expose, makes these programs marginally less effective. Intelligence services are already adapting, developing new approaches less vulnerable to public exposure. But awareness creates resilience. When people understand manipulation tactics, they become harder to manipulate. Sometimes I dream of a simple life, a small apartment overlooking the sea, anonymity, the luxury of introducing myself with a single, consistent name. Perhaps someday. For now, there's work to be done bringing light to methodologies that thrive in darkness. If you're watching this follow-up video, know that your attention matters. These systems depend on public indifference. By listening, by questioning, by supporting this channel, you're part of dismantling operations designed to weaponize human connection. The most revolutionary act in our surveilled age might be choosing authentic trust with open eyes. Not naive trust, but informed trust, the kind that acknowledges risks while refusing to surrender to isolation. That's the future I'm fighting for. One authentic connection at a time. My name was Anya Sokolova. Now I'm someone new. But for the first time, regardless of what name I use, I'm finally myself. 6 months after my second video, everything changed again. The network of former intelligence operatives we'd built, our Handler's Children Alliance, had grown to include 37 individuals from 12 different countries. Each brought unique insights into how their respective nations weaponized intimacy and trust. Together, we compiled a comprehensive report detailing methodologies, training techniques, and psychological impacts that transcended national boundaries. Then came the breach. I was giving a remote lecture to a human rights organization when Robert's emergency signal flashed on my secure phone. By the time I terminated the call and contacted him, 3 of our network members had already disappeared, one in Bucharest, another in Johannesburg, the third in Vancouver. Someone compromised our communication system, Robert explained, his voice tight with controlled panic. We need to scatter. Now. I abandoned my apartment within 15 minutes, leaving behind everything but a small go-bag I kept prepared for exactly this scenario. Old habits from my former life proved useful once again. As I moved through crowded streets, I employed every counter-surveillance technique I'd ever learned, watching for the telltale signs of being followed. For 3 weeks, I lived as a ghost again, moving between safe houses, using cash only, staying off networks. Reports filtered in sporadically, 2 more network members missing, another hospitalized after an accident, yet another suddenly recanting everything they'd ever said about intelligence operations in a bizarre press conference where they read stiffly from prepared statements. The message was clear: the shadows were reclaiming their own. I considered disappearing permanently. With my training, I could create a new identity far from this conflict, perhaps in some remote corner of South America or Southeast Asia. The temptation was almost overwhelming, to finally stop running, stop fighting. But then I received a message from Sophia, one of our newest network members. A former Greek intelligence operative, she'd been stationed in Moscow for years before her extraction. Her message was simple: they found my sister. I'm turning myself in to protect her. Don't try to contact me again. Keep fighting. That night, I made my decision. Instead of running further, I went public, completely public. No more shadows, no more altered voices or hidden faces. In a live-streamed broadcast picked up by major news networks worldwide, I revealed my full identity, shared documentation of my training and operations, and named specific program directors and facilities. My name is Anya Sokolova, I stated clearly, looking directly into the camera. I was trained as a psychological operative by Russian intelligence from 2011 to 2018. Everything I've shared about the program is true. I understand that this broadcast likely marks me for elimination, but silence equals complicity. The truth deserves witnesses. Within hours, the video had millions of views. My face was everywhere. Intelligence services could no longer make me disappear without confirming everything I'd claimed. My visibility became my shield. The Russian government immediately denounced me as a fabricator and traitor. Former colleagues emerged to claim I'd never been part of any program. Carefully edited photos appeared showing me with known Western intelligence officials, suggesting I was a long-term plant. But the documentation we'd compiled was too comprehensive to dismiss. Other governments, sensing an opportunity to embarrass Russia, began confirming elements of my account through strategic leaks and carefully worded statements that revealed their own knowledge of these programs while maintaining plausible deniability about their similar operations. 3 days after my broadcast, I received an encrypted message from an unexpected source, my former handler, Leonid. "You always were my most promising student," he wrote. "But you misunderstood the most important lesson: there are no heroes in this world, only survivors. What you're attempting is admirable but futile. These programs existed before either of us were born. They will continue long after we're gone." I replied with a single line: "That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to change them." His response came hours later: "A mutual acquaintance in Vienna sends regards. Protection protocols activated. Good luck, Anya." Robert had somehow reached him. My former handler was helping secure my safety. The irony wasn't lost on me. What followed was a whirlwind of secured testimonies before international human rights organizations, closed-door meetings with legislative committees, and carefully orchestrated media appearances. With each disclosure, the full scope of psychological intelligence operations worldwide became clearer to the public. We didn't just expose Russian programs, we revealed how these techniques had become standard practice across global intelligence communities. How the psychological weaponization of trust had evolved into a sophisticated international industry. How hundreds of operatives like me were deployed globally at any given moment, manipulating targets through manufactured intimacy. The public reaction was powerful. Protests erupted outside intelligence headquarters in several countries. Investigative journalists began identifying potential honeypot operations involving high-profile targets. Legislative hearings were called in 3 countries. 6 months into this campaign, I received news that changed everything. Intelligence reform legislation was being drafted in 2 major Western nations, with specific provisions addressing psychological manipulation operations. The shadows were being forced, gradually, into the light. But the personal cost remained high. I still lived under constant protection, moving locations frequently. Relationships outside our network were nearly impossible. The specter of my past training made potential friends and partners uneasy once they learned who I was. And the psychological wounds from my years in the field healed slowly, if at all. During a rare moment of relative safety, at a secure location in the mountains, I finally asked Robert the question that had haunted me since Vienna. When I told you the truth that day in the park, that I'd been sent to manipulate you, why did you help me instead of turning me in immediately? He gazed thoughtfully at the distant peaks before answering. Because in that moment, you chose humanity over duty. Authenticity over security. That choice deserved respect. He turned to me with a slight smile. Also, I'd suspected something was off for weeks. Your Russian idioms sometimes bled into your English, structures no native speaker would use. I laughed, genuinely surprised. My language skills were supposedly perfect. They were exceptional. But perfect doesn't exist in human connection, that's what makes it real. That conversation marked another turning point. If Robert had detected subtle inconsistencies despite my extensive training, others could too. The programs weren't infallible. Humanity always left traces, even in the most controlled performances. This realization became the foundation of our next initiative, developing educational resources to help people recognize signs of psychological manipulation. Not just in intelligence operations, but in daily life, manipulative relationships, coercive control, propaganda techniques. The skills I'd been taught to exploit human vulnerability could be inverted to help build psychological resilience. We launched a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting informed trust, the capacity to form genuine connections while maintaining healthy boundaries and critical awareness. Universities began incorporating our materials into psychology and international relations curricula. Community workshops sprung up globally. 3 years after my initial video, I returned to Moscow, not physically, but through a live video link at an international security conference. Russian officials had no choice but to participate, as boycotting would have been a tacit admission of everything I'd claimed. Facing the stone-faced intelligence officials on the other side of the video link, including several who had overseen my training, I felt a complex mix of emotions: fear, vindication, and something unexpected: compassion. They too were trapped in a system that valued control over humanity. The programs you oversee don't just damage targets, I told them. They destroy the operatives themselves, the very people you claim to be protecting through national security. There is no psychological training strong enough to completely overcome human need for authentic connection. Your assets aren't failing because they're weak. They're failing because they're human. General Petrov, now director of the program I'd escaped, leaned toward his microphone. Ms. Sokolova, you speak as though these alleged programs are unique to Russia. If such operations existed, wouldn't they be standard practice among all major intelligence services? Yes, I replied without hesitation. That's precisely my point. This isn't about nations or ideologies. It's about recognizing that certain operational approaches exact an unacceptable human cost across all borders. When we weaponize intimacy and trust, we damage the very foundations of human society. That exchange was broadcast globally. Within weeks, 2 high-ranking intelligence officials in different countries resigned, citing ethical reconsideration of standard practices. Small victories. Incremental changes. The slow turning of massive institutional ships. Last month, I received a package forwarded through multiple security protocols. Inside was a chess piece, a queen, with a note in familiar handwriting, from one player to another. Some games aren't worth winning. Leonid had defected. My former handler had followed my path. Today, as I prepare for another testimony before an international commission, I reflect on the girl I was at 19, idealistic, naive, believing in clear divisions between right and wrong, good and evil. That version of me could never have imagined the journey ahead, the darkness I would navigate, the person I would become. The programs still exist. Intelligence services have adapted, developing new methodologies less vulnerable to the specific exposures we've made. The shadows always find new forms. But they operate with greater constraints now, under heightened scrutiny and awareness. More importantly, our work has expanded beyond intelligence operations to address the broader human challenge of authentic connection in an increasingly manipulated world. In an age where artificial intelligence can mimic human interaction with growing sophistication, where digital environments blur the lines between genuine and manufactured experiences, the skills we teach have never been more essential. I still carry the wounds of my years as a psychological operative. The nightmares haven't stopped completely. I still analyze micro-expressions automatically, still notice subtle body language shifts others miss. These instincts will never fully disappear. But I've reclaimed those skills for something better than exploitation. Now they serve understanding rather than manipulation. Connection rather than control. Robert and I established a permanent home base last year, a small but secure compound where former operatives can find safety, support, and purpose. We call it simply, The Haven. 23 former assets from various nations currently live and work there, healing while helping others. The number matches exactly how many of us entered my training program that winter day in Kazan. I consider that symmetry a form of reclamation. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, we gather around a fire and share stories, not just of our operational pasts, but of our present journeys toward wholeness. These moments of authentic connection feel sacred after so many years of manufacturing counterfeit intimacy. If you're watching this final update, know that your attention to these issues matters profoundly. The weaponization of human connection thrives in darkness and indifference. Every person who understands these dynamics becomes more resilient against them. Trust remains our greatest vulnerability and our greatest strength. The choice to connect authentically, despite knowing the risks, is perhaps the most human decision we can make. Not naive trust, but informed trust, eyes open, boundaries clear, heart engaged nonetheless. That's the legacy I hope to leave, not just exposing shadows, but illuminating a path toward more genuine human connection in their wake. My name is Anya Sokolova. For years, I was trained to make you believe lies. Now, I dedicate my life to helping you recognize truth. The journey continues, one authentic connection at a time. The camera lingered on my face, no longer hidden, no longer afraid, as I offered a genuine smile. Thank you for witnessing my story. For those struggling to trust after betrayal, know that healing is possible. The capacity for authentic connection remains within you, waiting to be reclaimed. That's the truth they can never take away. If this story moved you, please share it with others who might benefit from understanding these dynamics. Your support helps ensure these hidden realities remain in the light where they can be addressed. Subscribe to follow our ongoing work creating a world where authentic human connection is protected as our most precious resource. The end.